Last Thursday, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, among others, made another mention of wanting to abolish capital punishment for good all across the country. She has called for the death penalty to be eliminated nationwide. Now, I know this is a highly volatile issue, and with more people all the time wanting to abolish it, but I think it still has its place. I know there are many people who think it has no place in a civilized society, but I think there's still warrant for it, and I want to explain my reasoning so we can dialogue. People claim, first of all, that it should not exist because it doesn't work as a deterrent. And the statistics seem to verify that that's true. But the real purpose of capital punishment, in my mind, is not a deterrence, but instead society's appropriate response to horrific crime. Right now, our judicial system mostly has two tools in its toolbox: community service or incarceration. We use longer terms of incarceration for worse crimes until we get into the ridiculous. 3 life sentences, 4 life sentences, as if we're going to keep their corpse in jail for an extra 250 years to really teach them a lesson they'll never forget. Well, it's obvious even to a casual observer that the judge believes at that point that something other than lifelong incarceration is warranted. But without capital punishment, we have no other tool to get to what is warranted. Now, other people say that it's just a barbaric cruelty to vindictively snuff out one person's life because they have snuffed out another person's life. But I say that if we refuse to do that, we are at the same time saying that the victim's life was not as important as the perpetrator's life, that the life of the perpetrator has more value than the life of the victim. And I don't agree. What I think is barbaric is letting the criminal have the rest of his life with the state paying for his food and housing and clothing when the victim has been deprived of that. See, to me, there's something very unjust in that. Instead, and let me try to give some examples, I think we all agree, I should hope we all agree, that Adolf Hitler and his generals and the guys who ran the extermination camps honestly deserved to die for their horrific war crimes. So also dictators like Joseph Stalin for murdering 25 million of his own people. These are absurd abuses of power and horrific crimes against humanity that incarceration simply does not address. There's an old story, it's half meant as a joke, but it's not a joke at all, where a man says to a woman, "Will you sleep with me for $10 million? And she says, "Of course I would." And he says, "Would you sleep with me for $1 million? And she says, "Well, yeah." And little by little, he reduces the price until she gets annoyed and even offended. And in her frustration, she says, "No, what do you think I am?" And the man says, "Well, we established that at the first offer. Now we're just negotiating a price." If people like Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Idi Amin, Pol Pot, Joseph Kony show us that capital punishment is legitimate in certain situations, then what about a person who traffics children into sex slavery? What about a man who sexually abuses children and then murders them? What about a man who rapes and dismembers women? What about a man who walks into an elementary school and murders little children and their teachers in cold blood? I know eventually you're going to say, hey, wait a minute. But my point is this. I hope that I've already established that capital punishment has its place. And what's left for us is to negotiate its proper application. Cautions against people being unjustly executed are extremely valid, which is why our legal system uses every tool available, ideally, especially now DNA analysis, along with other sciences and forensic tools to get it right. See, when we outlaw the death penalty, we are telling the murderer, the rapist, and the trafficker that no matter what they do to innocent people and to what extent, the state will protect them. We will give them housing and clothing and food and protection for the rest of their lives. We guarantee it in advance. Whatever you do, we will value you and protect you. To me, it's a backwards way of thinking that a society values the lives of its worst offenders more than the most innocent of its people. In a society such as ours, it's inevitable that we're going to run into conflicting values. I've previously had a discussion of the conflicting rights of the LGBTQ+ community versus religious freedom. Both sides have rights, and our society has to choose which rights supersede the others. It's not that the rights of one group matter and the rights of the other group doesn't matter, but we have to decide which rights supersede others for the ultimate good of society. And to me, it's the same with capital punishment issues. The victim's life had intrinsic value, and so does the life of the perpetrator. But we have to decide which one we're going to legislate to protect. In my opinion, if we show that the life of the criminal has more worth than the life of his innocent victim, we have turned both sense and morality on its head and made a terrible mistake. And that's why I believe in capital punishment. It's the only just recourse in certain situations.